So, in this first part of the lecture, we're going to focus on basically the reasons that you make a pitch and the people that would be interested in learning about it. So we're going to talk about stakeholders and we're going to talk about target audiences. So some of you might be wondering, what is a game pitch? Usually a game pitch is a short presentation or a short document, usually in a slide deck format. So usually you're creating slides for people that very briefly explains the most exciting parts of your game project in order to get stakeholders interested. So this is the things to keep in mind here are that it's usually presented in person, sometimes via email, or both. Usually if you present in person, you also send an email summarizing the same information. And the point, it has to be very concise because people don't have a lot of time. You want to respect people's time. It has to be very exciting. So the point of a pitch is to get people really hyped and excited about your game in order for them to do something for you. So usually that means giving you money. Sometimes it's for other reasons, but you need to get them excited enough that they're willing to basically open their wallets without thinking about it too much. And the people that are that you're talking to would be your stakeholders. So who are my potential stakeholders? What is a stakeholder? Stakeholder is basically anyone who has a stake in your project, where a stake is either time or money, like usually significant amounts of both. So a stakeholder could be, and these are all potential places that you could pitch. So it could be internally to your team or your studio. So you could be pitching a new project idea that the studio might want to make. This sometimes happens at smaller, medium-sized studios. So Double Fine, for example, used to have a yearly, I think it was yearly game jam just for their own employees, where they would make, some cool projects over a couple of days, basically some little prototypes. And then they would, the teams that made them would pitch them to the rest of the studio to potentially turn them into a full-length game. In this case, what you're trying to do is get your team on board, so get them excited about making the game. You may also use this if you're hiring, for example, or if you're trying to form a team for a game in some way. But you're talking to people who are potentially going to put a big time investment and probably emotional investment into the game, not necessarily money. You could be pitching to a crowd or an audience. So this could be for crowdfunding, so something like Kickstarter, or anything where you need the audience to be invested in the work. So this is going beyond just having them try out the game. This is, you might be setting up a website in order to drive mailing list signups, or joining a Discord, or pushing people to your storefront, or getting them to sign up for your social media, right? All of these things are sort of a bigger investment for somebody than merely looking at your game for 5 seconds or playing a demo of it, because they actually have to either buy it or become interested in the project in kind of a long-term way, or become interested in your community in a long-term way. Okay, so platforms are a potential stakeholder. A platform may allow your game on their storefront. Some platforms have curated storefronts, which means they choose the games that go on their platform, that you can't just pay to get in, or it's not free in some way. And so for those platforms where curation exists, you're going to be pitching your game in order to convince them that it is of worthwhile quality, the team can be trusted, that sort of thing. They're not usually giving you money. Publishers, who do usually give you money for either production or marketing support, or you might get marketing firms whose only job is to support your game through marketing, and that might mean they pay for it. They pay for the marketing and they do it. Or it might mean that they're just offering you, you're paying them and they're offering you support. But either way, you're going to need to have a pitch for them to do something with. In the case of marketing support, they'll probably be making it better, but that's not always the case. So they can frame your message more effectively. Just going to wait for Jeff to finish talking. Okay, so you might be talking to investors. Investors are usually people who directly want to give you money to make your game and probably won't have very much else involvement. Or it might be government bodies who want to give you art or business grants in order to make your game. which you have to fill out usually lengthy applications for, including a lot of writing. So having the pitch be concise and well written and professional is going to help them get to the point and get on board so that you can get your money faster. So going into this in slightly more detail, let's talk a little bit about platforms specifically. So a platform, the definition of a platform, in case you don't know, is any place that you can sell your game, and it often comes with technical requirements. So this could be, for example, iOS, Android, PS4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, any of the new ones that are coming out, so PS5, can't remember what the new Xbox is called, Xbox X, Xbox S, something like that, Steam, Humble, Epic, itch.io, etc. And there are some related terms. Sometimes these are used, Series X, thank you. Sometimes these are used interchangeably, and sometimes they mean specific things. So when I use the word storefront, I mean the virtual space in which the game is sold. So this could be Steam, could be the Nintendo eShop, it could be the PlayStation Store, the Google Play Store, etc. That's what's meant by storefront, but sometimes it's used interchangeably with platform. A platform holder is the company that runs the platform. So that would be Valve, Nintendo, Sony, Epic, etc. And then a console rep, dev relations, and third-party relations are all used a little bit interchangeably, but they all mean the people that you talk to at a platform holder who help you get on the platform. So these are the people you're having a meeting with. So some platforms require specific permission from the company to be allowed to develop for them. So any of the consoles, for example, they're like curated storefronts, so you need permission. Really like talking to developers and are enthusiastic about games, but they also receive a lot of pitches, so it can be hard to get their attention. So reps are extremely valuable resources for developers. If you have a rep, like, hold on to them, be nice to them, respect their time, because they get a lot of requests and they have to deal with a lot of people. And even though they really like games, that can be really tough for them. And just as a side note, third party, if you haven't heard this term before, this is the term that consoles use to mean indies or any company that they don't have a close relationship with. So first party game is something that is internally developed by the platform. So something like Mario with Nintendo or Zelda games, those are first party games. Second party games are developed for a console with the blessing of a platform holder, but by a separate studio. So Cadence of Hyrule, for example, was made by, I think, Brace Yourself Games. It's a larger, it's like a AAA company, so it's a larger indie company, but it's using first party characters because it's Zelda based, and so they had to get permission from Nintendo. Well, in fact, Nintendo basically paid them to make that. And some AAA titles would also be considered second party, and then third party is the rest of us. So if you heard the term third party, it probably means you. Is a company that funds production or marketing or both. Production and marketing of games in exchange for recoupment, revenue share, or IP ownership when the game releases. Market the game, a publisher does, and often deals with platforms importing on your behalf. Not always. It really depends on the terms of your agreement, but that is a thing that they can potentially do for you. So some examples of indie publishers are Finji, Devolver, Annapurna, Double Fine. Well, Double Fine actually doesn't produce games anymore, or publish games anymore, because they got bought by Microsoft, but they used to. Curve Digital, Raw Fury, Limited Run. And then there are bigger ones like EA, Nintendo, etc. But the ones I listed are the ones that you would be most likely to deal with if you were going to try to publish the game that you're making right now. So to explain some of these terms, recoupment means the publisher takes usually 100% of the profit of the game until all of their costs are paid off. If they're fully financing your game, like all of production and all of marketing, that can be from the hundreds of thousands to the millions of dollars. And so they're going to work hard to make sure that your game sells. But also, you're going to have to pay off costs pretty much forever. You may, depending on the scope of the game and its sales figures, that might mean the developer never actually makes money on sales. It all goes to the publisher. Revenue share. This is a term to describe the split of profits once the game releases. So publishers may ask for a large share of profits in exchange for funding your game, although it depends on the extent of their involvement. And by large share, I mean more than 50%. Though the balance may be in the favor of the publisher, this is still really attractive to studios who need budgets much larger than they can finance or raise themselves. So if my next game costs me $3 million to make, for example, which is a relatively modest budget if it took, years and had a team of 5 or more people, let's say, I can't finance that myself, but a publisher could. So if I could convince them with a really good pitch that I can be trusted to make a really good game, potentially I'd be able to get that money, but it does mean that I'd probably be paying them back for a long time. And then IP ownership. So IP stands for intellectual property, and that is the sort of like copyright property of the game project itself and all the rights to distribute it and profit from it. So if you give away your IP, that means you always have to get permission from the publisher to do anything with the game yourself, or you just forgo that right altogether. You may not have that right anymore. That also means, like, if your publisher owns your IP, they could, for example, sell the rights to a TV show of it, and you probably wouldn't receive any benefit from that. But it really depends on your agreement. I'm kind of giving you worst case scenarios. But anyway, these are all things that publishers will ask for, given that they're funding your whole project, potentially. There are publishers that will do less, like they might just do finishing funding, they might just do marketing, in which case, or porting, in which case that's, going to be less of an investment. So what happens if your game totally flops? In the case of the publisher funding everything and recouping from it, it simply means they will not recoup. They'll be the one taking on the risk, and they'll be the one losing the money. It is partially on them, usually, to market your game and to help you make it not flop. And what it means is that publishers will hedge their bets and they'll diversify their resources. So they will fund a bunch of games knowing that only 1 in 5 of them are really going to make their money back, but it will make the money back for all 5 of those games, right? So investors and government funding. This is another source of funding. Some examples of this, Indie Fund, who I was funded by, Angel Investment, Canada Media Fund, Ontario Creates, who I was also funded by, Ontario Arts Council, your family, anybody, an individual or a company that funds the game project or part of the game project in exchange for usually recoupment or revenue share when the game releases. Sometimes they also ask for a share in your company. So if you have a corporation, they might ask for 10% of that corporation's future profits. That could be a thing. So usually investors are really hands off. They only provide money, not support. So where publishers will help you port, help you market, usually do a lot of those things for you, investors just invest money, and then you're expected to, do with it what you will. If you receive a grant, and some government funding is in the form of grants, including Ontario Creates and Ontario Arts Council, that's not repayable. So they give you the money, you fill out the paperwork, you give them reports usually, and you have milestones. But ultimately, you use that money for production, and that money is yours to keep. I mean, you have to use it for that project, but you don't have to pay it back out of revenue. Your game could make no money after that, and it would be fine. But a loan, on the other hand, is repayable. So Canada Media Fund is one of the major funding bodies in Canada in the interactive media sector, and they give you loans. You have to pay back the loan within a certain period of time after your game comes out. And presumably that comes from sales. Okay, so who else do we pitch to? These are the ones that I mentioned. The stakeholders are the big ones, really. And you're going to have to be really professional when you do it. And it's a big deal getting a meeting with a publisher or a platform. But there are other kind of versions of this, right? So if you demo your game, which some of you might at Level Up, right? If you're familiar with that, or if you ever end up at PAX or TCAF or GDC or any of these game events, you might be in a position where you're showing your game in public, especially before release. So some people who see your game are going to be big fans of the kind of game that you're making, although probably not your game specifically because they probably won't know about it. And some will just be along for the ride. They'll just be there to hang out at the event. They'll be chaperoning people. They'll be, like the spouse of the person who wants to play. There'll be sometimes business people, so some publishers and developer relations people, or people who are interested in investment or localization or like a variety of other things. They might not actually play games that much themselves. This might just be their job. But you still have to talk to those people, and in fact, it's important too, right? So they might not be familiar with your specific genre, even if they play games. You still have to be able to give them your pitch, and their pitch still has to be like understandable to them. You might be talking to journalists or streamers. You might be reaching out to them directly to ask them to cover your game. So concise pitching is really essential for these exchanges and helps make journalists' lives easier because they don't have to think about how to introduce your game to their audience as much. Anything that you can do to make their job faster is like useful. And I know some people have commented like, oh, why should I respect these people's time? It's their job to write about my game. Well, they get like 100 pitches a day. They really don't have to write about your game. They can write about literally anything else that comes into their inbox. Their coverage is basically a favor. So if you're asking a favor, be respectful, be concise, don't waste their time. And you may find yourself wanting to apply to be an official selection at a festival or an event. So if you ever apply to be an indie mega booth at PAX, if you ever apply to be in the Mix, which is a showcase that happens at all the PAXs and GDCs, if you ever apply to be an Indiecade, which is like an indie-based festival, or any of these other places like E3 or whatever, they're going to require you to submit applications which include wording that you develop for your pitch. So it makes it a lot less time consuming for you to come up with that wording if you just like kind of have it off the top of your head. So those are some of the other ways that a pitch is used. So you can see like, wow, pitches are pretty useful. There's like a lot of people that you can use your pitch on. So if you have future plans for the game you're making now, if you're planning on like bringing it somewhere or doing something with it, or even using it as a portfolio piece in order to get a job, knowing how to construct that pitch is a really valuable skill. And like with other parts of your GDD, it's going to be iterative. You're going to improve every time you give your pitch based on feedback and what you find works and doesn't work to get people hyped about your game. So just like you would bring a demo and see what people are getting bored on or stuck on or frustrated with and change those things, you would also like alter your pitch to make sure that you're actually like keeping people engaged. So speaking of demos and showing your game to people, let's briefly talk about target audience. So your target audience is basically the primary demographic group that you want to play your game. It should be relatively narrow. It's never everyone. There's so many times when I've done assignments asking people what their target audience is, and they say, well, it's everybody. It's people ages 5 to 99. And you're like, well, that's great. Everybody can play what you're making, but probably not everybody is interested in playing what you're making, and so you should target the people who are going to be like your optimal group. So so it has to be like a narrow group. So for example, you could say English-speaking people aged 20 to 35 who are interested in creative arts in the environment and play mid-core games. And I can explain what some of those things are. If your game is for yourself, which probably a lot of you are making things that you think like, well, the other people in my program would play it. Okay, so then imagine how someone would describe the demographic you belong to. So some things to pay attention to might be your gender, your age group, your affluence level, your geographic location, so whether you live in the city or the country. Your interests are very important. Your friend groups, so like who are you going to get info about this game via word of mouth, which is how a lot of people actually like make purchasing decisions. And pay special attention to the other games they play, if any. So we can categorize players based on the type of game or the genre of game, right? And also the number of hours per week that they might spend playing. You could even split those into two axes if that makes sense to you. So we usually use like these terms, novice, casual, mid-core, and hardcore, to describe that kind of like these different play behaviors. So a novice doesn't play games at all. Could be a child. or it could be like an older person that didn't grow up with video games, right? Casual mostly plays games that don't require extreme skill with controllers and are usually lighter in content, or have lighter content in them. They probably don't play for many hours a week compared to consuming other kinds of media, and people often conflate casual and mobile players, but those don't necessarily match up. People can play mobile games in a hardcore fashion. Anybody wants to come to my Pokemon Go Discord group, anyone wants to come to any of the Animal Crossing groups I'm in right now, like those might be considered casual games, but the people who are playing them are not playing them casually necessarily. Or they might play something like a console shooter. You're like, that's a hardcore game. Maybe they play that very casually, just when friends come over, right? Like they're not very good at it, I guess, because they haven't put a lot of time into it. A mid-core player is where a lot of console players fit, though again, like these don't map one-to-one, but this kind of person plays probably a medium amount of hours per week. Like they do put in time with video games every week. They probably choose games which would be like tough for a novice to understand but are not considered extremely difficult. So think maybe Breath of the Wild, right? Like that's a mid-core game. And then a hardcore player plays a lot of hours per week or plays notoriously challenging games, and this would include like esports players. So anybody who's spending most of their media time on video games or a specific video game, I would consider hardcore. Does that make sense? Difference between mid-core and hardcore? These are pretty, like, I mean, they are generalizations, right? But the point of constructing a target audience is kind of to make generalizations at that point. Like, we're not saying that anybody who, is in your target audience is going to be, like, exactly like this. But if we can imagine one sort of ideal player who has, like, all of these, who has like whatever habits it is that you want to be part of your game, who has the habits that would like match up with what your game sort of produces for them, then that's what you should put in your target audience. Hope that makes sense. Sorry.